Welcome back to a very, very special episode of the USL Show. It's our State of the USL. This is, I think, the first time that the USL has done this, and it's definitely going to be the first time it's going to be like this because this is the first year we've had the W League. So we're basically going to be talking about the stuff that went on the pitch, the stuff that went on off the pitch, how content creators were affected, how the players, how the ownership, how fans were all affected. There's a whole lot of moving pieces to the USL, and it's not perfect. They did some things well, and we're here to talk about the good, bad, and the indifferent. So let's go ahead, jump on in, and I want to just go ahead and start with the person that, I've had a great chance to get to know, especially with the W League starting, and that's Liz. How you doing?
Hey, I'm pretty good. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I've been doing kind of soccer stuff since right before the pandemic, but I've never actually been a guest on something. Or like a, non-host. So I'm excited to be here.
Cool. So what all are you a part of for people who maybe don't know?
Yes. So I'm Liz, and I create content around women's soccer for the Protagonist Soccer. So that's WPSL, UWS, and then now with the creation of the W League, USLW. So yeah, Kayla and I had a really great opportunity to do the Pick'em panel with the W League. We can talk about more of that later, but that was a really great opportunity for the front office to just be like, hey, let's get content creators involved. And that's something I have not seen from other lower league women's leagues. So but yeah, so that's kind of what I do too. I also work for a WPSL team, California Storm. So that's kind of something that I do on the side, distantly, not a conflict of interest, but but yeah.
Just a little subtle, a little something on the side, no big deal.
Yeah, we don't talk about it.
To the person to your right is Kyle Carr. Yeah, I think everybody knows you, but for the people who don't, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Sorry about that. Yikes.
Maybe not.
Yikes.
Maybe not.
I'm okay. But no, I am Kyle. I'm Kyle Carr. I am one of the co-hosts for Walking 90, which covers all thing USL League One. I'm also pretty heavily involved in the Ford Madison fan support culture. So created one of the supporter groups, Featherstone Flamingos. I help out with New Dogma Zine, which is kind of a fanzine that has been going around to cover stuff within Ford Madison. So just doing a little bit of that. And between all that, there's also the Milwaukee Bucks, so the NBA team writing for Brew Hoop, which is over on SB Nation. So those are kind of my fun sports stuff that I do. And then spare time is being a parent and play video games. Pretty great.
Yes.
Sounds like a good time to me. I mean, hey, your Bucks are doing pretty well right now too.
I'm pretty happy with it, and that's without their second best player. So hopefully, once he gets back, things will continue to be pretty good. Winning the title a couple of years ago was probably one of the best things ever, and hopefully, I can. If they do it again, I can actually go to the parade this go around.
That'd be nice. Now, the person to my right and above Kyle, people know on the USL show, very much a regular. And that's John Morrissey of USL Tactics, Backheeled, and whatever else you do. Please go to sleep for once. John, how you doing?
Yeah, doing well. I mean, I'll spare the introduction. People who watch this know me. I tweet too much about the USL and write too much about the USL, so that's my gig.
Is there really such a thing as writing too much about the USL?
No, but other people seem to disagree, maybe.
It's not about how much you write. It's about how little you sleep. You're tweeting things at 4:30 in the morning.
I get that. Being up at 4:30 in the morning, it's relatable.
Oh, man.
There you go.
So we're going to I have a whole bunch of questions that have already been written up. But for people who are in the comments, please post some in here. We'll try to answer them as they come in. But we have a whole lot of stuff to get through, so we might as well just go ahead and start. And the first question is, how do you feel like the league that you covered performed on the pitch? Do you feel like it's an improvement? And for, Liz, obviously the W League didn't exist last year. How did it compare, to other leagues around? So, yeah, start off with Liz. How do you feel like the W League compared to the other leagues that were at its level?
Yeah. I would say the highs are high and the lows are low compared to WPSL and UWS. I think that's like a really like honest and fair assessment, is that there can be a big gap in between the really good teams in each conference and then the ones that need to do a little bit more development. Everyone's starting off fresh, most of them at least. So it can be expected the freshman year is kind of a little growing pain wise. But WPSL, UWS, I always feel like generally there is more consistent and more competitive conferences. But I mean, how did they do on the field? Like, some of the best soccer that I saw this year was in the USLW. I was just so impressed by, and I mean, I watched them in college. So most of these names, like, I'm not, unfamiliar with them, but it's so refreshing to see them just ball out with their summer league team. Teams that they don't play with a lot. They see them for like 6 weeks, a minimum sometimes, but the chemistry was great. I enjoyed it. Great soccer. All around, and no complaints. And I'm just really, they set the bar really high for their next season. So, and there's a lot that is going to be coming out in the next couple of days. Things that are going to be really exciting for the next season. And I'm so excited for it.
So next couple of days, I mean, maybe don't let me overstep, but I mean, I think there's something coming out tomorrow, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's all pretty much coming out tomorrow, but I'm not really sure. I don't know what else. There's more on Friday, but I actually don't know what that one is. But we're all finding out about Friday together. But yeah,
this should be fun.
Yeah.
Very excited about that. Kyle, you've had a chance to see. Well, I mean, unfortunately, you did have to watch Ford Madison this year. I'm sorry, but the highs were high in the Henny Derby. That was fun. But
I'm gonna say that's the highlight for me, is winning the Henny Derby. It is sitting on my desk over to the side, so I'm very happy about that. And I know Elliot is probably swearing into the text me some obscenity later on, but no, I think. Oh, go ahead.
The league itself, like, how do you feel like the league's improved? I know for us, we started really following or covering it for the first time this year on the USL show, and it's been really cool to see the growth throughout the year. How do you think it's gone from years past to now?
I think the quality has it's increased so much, and especially with the MLS2 teams leaving, I think it added both a layer of more stability, but also more parity as well. I think because in the past, I was like, North Texas was always going to have talented players, but the issue was, and especially with other teams like Revs 2, Toronto FC2, Fort Lauderdale, is on their best day, they can beat you 3-0, 4-1, no problem. But on the worst day, they look like a team that never played together. And that's a lot with the player movement. And then there's Orlando City B, which was always terrible. Now, with all those teams gone, you kind of saw like every team seemed to improve. And the results also match it. Union Omaha making a quarterfinal of the U.S. Open Cup, beating 2 MLS teams. Greenville, I was going to say, like, Greenville was still consistently pretty good. They were still the second seed. Richmond, took everyone by storm. Terzaghi, once again, gets another Golden Boot and another MVP. But even a team like South Georgia Temecula, which it took a while at the beginning of the season, but they were beating USL championship teams in that Open Cup. And, I think NOCO had beaten an MLS team. Fuego beat an MLS team. And I was going to say, like, Ford Madison and Tucson were pretty competitive against MLS teams as well. So it's just the quality has been so much higher. And the fact that it took until the second to last game for teams to really get eliminated. Like, Tucson was sitting last place, but they could still have made the playoffs if things broke in a ridiculous way. And I think it's just one of those where there was no guarantee that you were going to win unless you were playing Ford Madison at the end of the season, or North Carolina, or Tucson at the beginning. But I think every team had a stretch where they looked like they could win. Like, if they get hot, they could win a title, or at the very least host a playoff game.
To your point, I mean, Tormenta, the champions of League One, if things were to break wrong for them, they could have either finished as high as second or they could have finished, I think it was as low as 8th.
Yeah.
And that could have happened in just the final week. That was as much parity was going on in League One that they could have missed the playoffs entirely and not even be close to getting in. It's ridiculous how close that league was.
And even Northern Colorado, which was an expansion team, they only missed out because they had one less win than Charlotte Independence. They had a higher goal difference, but in USL, wins are the first tiebreaker. So it was just the margins being that thin, especially for a team that came in year one to almost make the playoffs. It's going to be interesting to see how it moves forward, especially with more and more teams coming in and how ambitious. I mean, you get a former CEO of Liverpool coming in, owning a team. How competitive are they going to want to be? And I think it just forces everyone else to kind of step their game up.
For sure. John, you have been collecting stats, watching film for, 2.5 years now consistently. You've seen the highs and lows of the USL Championship. How do you feel like it's compared to years past with the competition on the pitch?
Yeah, I think Kyle made a really astute point in identifying the exit of those MLS2 teams as something that adds a whole nother level of excitement and parity within these leagues. I think for me, it was really marked in the Western Conference this year, where pretty much every single team was in it through the last couple weeks of the season. And traditionally, you would have bottom feeders, and by parallel, you saw it in the Eastern Conference with the New York Red Bulls too, Loudoun United, who just simply weren't going to win games. And I think that consistent level of play, being able to face a team every single week that has a devoted fan base, really adds something on the pitch. It builds the environment off of it. And beyond that, this felt like another year where the trend has continued of young talent developed by these USL Championship clubs really taking a step up and making themselves felt across the league, whether that's a Josh Winder in Louisville. You've seen it with the Oloskis, who have grown up in the USL, and one of them won the Golden Boot this year after moving away from an MLS2 team. So I think in a lot of ways, in that sense, I don't know if necessarily the quality of play itself has taken a massive leap, but it's grown incrementally, and that parity has just been striking.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about how good it's gotten with the, subtraction of MLS, well, some of the MLS2 teams, our good friend Ryan had even said that this San Antonio team is the best team to ever do it. And Louisville, depending on if they would have won that match, would have also been the best team to ever do it. It's really cool to see that we're seeing what seems to be a golden generation, but we seem to say that every year. So it's fun to see that, and also just more teams really embracing that club mentality and really growing their youth players. But we're going to move on, and the next question, and I'm going to throw it to you, Liz, is going to be the league. How did you feel like the W League was advertised? Do you feel like they pushed out their product enough? Do you think they did the right things to push out the product?
I think so. I mean, it was, this is a league technically that actually had already existed prior, but it went into whatever. It didn't fold, but it went on a very long pause. So they did a really great job in bringing that back. They were intentional about it. They were, obvious that this wasn't something that was meant to absorb all the other leagues, but was meant to like heighten the product in our communities. And then individually, I would say within each team, a lot of them, of course, are USL men's teams, USL champions, or one or two. And I was really, honestly, really impressed by what teams were doing. They did a great job kind of making sure that game days, like for the women's teams, they were, they had live tweets, or they had practice content. I want to say most of the teams were live streaming, which I know we'll talk about that later. But, they made the equipment, the personnel accessible to get that product live. And yeah, overall, I was really impressed. Lisa at USL, Kaylor, you've worked with her, just fabulous person who's really passionate, just approachable, accessible, and has created also this great community of content creators. And I think that's really important. So yeah, I really at this point have no notes for them. They did a good job, but yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they can improve that going forward, because as the league grows, they're going to bring in Super League. They're going to have to dedicate resources to both, make sure both are, being treated fairly. So interested to see that strategy.
For sure. Kicking over to you, Kyle. I mean, how do you feel?
It's interesting because I feel like it's a little bit of the league itself can do more because the product is good. And I think most of the advertising and like the promotion and what gets people into it is just fans that are of these teams that are watching. It's like, okay, we've always said this is a really stupid league because you'll have one team, Charlotte Independence loses 7-0, and then turn around and beat a team 6-2. No one knows what to expect. And I think that was one of the best appeals of it. And I think with the league, it's kind of like they got to find a way to continue talking more about these clubs and giving more of a story about the clubs. I mean, obviously, people know Fort Madison, people know Union Omaha, people know Richmond and Greenville and Tormenta. And a lot of that is because those clubs have done the work that it needs to promote itself and put itself in that position. But then, it feels as though, especially with teams of the West Coast, with like a Tucson, with Northern Colorado, with Fuego, we didn't get as much of like who they are, what they're doing. And part of that could just be that it's still relatively newer, but I'm hoping we can kind of get to learn more about these clubs. And I think that's something that I would love to see the league kind of try and do more. It's like, give us an idea of what these clubs are, not putting it just on the clubs to kind of say, this is who we are. So otherwise, I think like in terms of getting the message out there, and I think the league and all the teams did a pretty good job at, providing the live tweets of what's going on, providing content, whether it's, getting to know the players or just like training photos. I think they did a good job at that, but I think just getting more into learning more about who the clubs are would be a pretty good stuff, because they did that a lot in 2019 in year one of the league. But I know with like the pandemic, I'm sure that caused like resources to get allocated and shifted. But I would say that's probably the only thing, is just letting us get to know more about the clubs themselves instead of having the clubs do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, to your point with that, I mean, we see a lot of clubs are doing their best, especially on social media, trying to push out their own stuff. But it's also just like most people aren't following every single club on Twitter or on Instagram. We would love to see some highlights come from the official league Twitter, where a lot of people do get their information from. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's just like the accessibility would be great.
For sure. John, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the club point is pretty salient here, just because I think there really is a question of how many people are interested in the league as a whole versus just caring about their local club, the team that they can watch in person week in and week out. From my experience writing and podcasting and whatnot about the championship, and in the limited contact I've had with the league office, for instance, a lot of the time they are very much trying to push those narratives of, oh, okay, we sold Kobe Henry off for X amount of money. You guys at Backheeled can do an exclusive interview with him, because we're trying to push this narrative and get people to watch USL on the terms of, this is the future of American soccer or something like that, where I think that they could do a better job of focusing on, hey, this is really high quality football being played on the pitch week in and week out. Say what you will about the broader fit of this league in the global landscape. It's just a really enjoyable experience with a lot of fun ticks every single week. So I think the league, and certainly the USL Championship, benefits more than any other league under the USL umbrella from the media promotion standpoint, just by the fact of the TV deal and that sort of thing that we'll get into in a minute. But I think that the marketing and the angle they take could use a bit of refinement.
Yeah, and I want to go ahead and jump right in on that with the streaming deal. The Championship and League One have both been on ESPN Plus. And then for League Two, It's kind of been on the clubs to, if they want to upload or if they want to live stream, if they even have the ability or the means to, which it's not cheap all the time. I know you can put your phone on there and try to live stream, but I think a lot of clubs would feel more embarrassed by a low quality stream, so they'd rather have no stream. But then we have W League. That 11 was a great streaming platform, but sometimes, not every club was involved. How did you feel the 11 partnership worked out for W League, Liz?
Yeah, I know that they have similar deals with WPSL and UWS where they are free to clubs, I guess, and or at least the clubs don't individually pay to live stream or whatnot. But I mean, it does what it needs to do. It's just like a basic YouTube. It's like it's YouTube basically, but kind of with a more sportsy, soccery like user interface. But yeah, I know a lot of the clubs. I'm hoping that changes next season. A lot of the clubs did not stream, or even air, non-live games if they didn't have streaming equipment. If they at least had like an ability to record, upload later. I was really disappointed in Racing Louisville not streaming any of their games. They had players, like fantastic players, and they were just hoarding that, and no one could see their home games. And yeah, the club, NWSL club, and the USL champion, like championship team, they did not give them the proper, streaming equipment for that. So I'm hoping that changes next year. I think it's in the plans though. But yeah, so for most teams like Minnesota Aurora, I want to say Tormenta, Indy 11. I'm like blanking, but there were a lot who had, obviously like a great setup, and something that we don't get a lot in lower league for women is like a commentary. It's not just like the sounds of a distant freeway and like, players screaming. But there was like a dedicated home commentator who was not only knowledgeable about their own players, but knowledgeable about the opponent's players, and was able to add some color commentary and whatnot. So I was really impressed by a lot of teams that had that. And I think that raises the bar within their own conferences, because if each conference has one that has that, the rest will feel, not obligated, but inspired to do the same. And then that's just generally how you raise the bar. I think a lot of people write off, the summer leagues as a summer league, but this is a really great opportunity to put out quality football, and get people just engaged and excited and ready for Super League.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what was ended up being difficult with trying to talk about the matches. We were trying to discuss a few W League matches every single week on this show, but then we ended up watching the same 4 or 5 teams. I mean, to your point with good broadcast, if I remember right, Detroit Cities was awesome.
Oh yeah.
They had a wonderful broadcast team for W League, and that was really, really cool to watch. And so we ended up watching the same teams, and it felt like other teams were really falling behind by not broadcasting themselves. And I feel like the league could definitely do more to help those clubs out with maybe at least showing them how they can do it, because some people are just afraid to put their voice on a mic.
Yeah.
And I was gonna ask Liz, do you think that's something that will change with some of these teams? They were brand new, so maybe they just didn't have the resources. Do you think there'll be more that do it in the future, or those that were over in the UWS, WPSL that came over to USL, do you think they're going to maybe eventually get into it?
Yeah.
Or more of it will happen?
I think that streaming is meant to be a requirement soon, for not only current teams, but expansion wise, they will have that as a requirement. And I think that they were just very lenient with, the first year, kind of everyone getting used to it. But I think also teams that maybe were hesitant to get it started, they'll see the value it adds. And that'll be something that they put a budget towards, because you'll have teams like, Racing, attracted a lot of great players because of their academy setup and their great, facilities. But teams will stream and show their quality of their program, and players want to go play. Like, they want to go play. They don't want to waste their summer feeling like they're playing like rec. They want to go, and what better way to show your quality than to stream your games? So yeah, I think it's going to change going forward.
Fair, true. So for League One, I've had my personal beef with League One and Championship, how ESPN does it. Whenever you go to find these matches, you'll be behind a Division III basketball game, and it's like, oh, there is the game of the week in League One. Like, it really sucks in that sense. But other than, I guess, that, or even with that, how do you feel like League One fared with ESPN Plus?
I think it is what, like, I guess I'm in the it is what it is because there's not really another option. I know some teams are able to try and get it on local broadcasts. I remember Ford Madison in 2020 had a local broadcast pick up the games as well. And it was actually not too far behind the actual match itself, which was pretty nice compared to ESPN Plus, where you might be a minute and a half behind. And it's like, oh, crap. So if you're doing watch parties and like you have one person that's way farther ahead. So I think it is one of those where it would be nice. I think because how my ESPN is set up, it was thankfully able to let me know, hey, there's a Ford Madison game coming up. But if I'm just trying to see what championship or USL League One game is going on and it's not a Ford Madison, I have to like go through and go to soccer. Then I have to go into leagues. Then I got to find League One, which is like the 10th league on there. And it's just, it is very tedious and frustrating because it would be like Major League Lacrosse would be on there. It's like, what? Come on. Like, we got to do a little bit better. So I think in terms of like the streaming itself, it is like I said, it is what it is. And kind of the same with like the quality. You know, some teams are going to have a much better stadium view because that's just how their stadium is set up. Other teams, not so much because it's just not like how the infrastructure works. It just, you don't get as good of a quality. So that's going to be the tough part. I think with teams that build new stadiums, that is something that they'll have the advantage of moving forward is you'll get a better quality because you can get a better camera angle so you can kind of see more of what's going on as opposed to, well, this is the best we can do because that's just how it was built. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that changes moving forward. And, you know, when you have the final, that's on ESPN2, that's a little bit different on that end. So that's kind of cool that, like, at least for the bigger games, you know, I know there's a Greenville Union Omaha game outside ESPN2 at one point. This past final was on ESPN2. So getting to that level as well would be pretty nice. But I guess it's kind of hard to like say, like, yes, I would love the streaming to be better because it's not like there's another viable option out there. But the commentary team is great. I will say, like, each of them have done a great job at least trying to learn it to the best of their ability. But having more commentators would probably be the other thing. Like, that's a realistic change that I would like to see, is getting more commentators and analysts on as well. And maybe even like a short pregame or postgame show, like for the week in review kind of thing.
That's something I've heard a lot of people say, is that they would love to see more national broadcast people, more voices, maybe something we've talked about before, maybe some more voices from around the league, not even just someone who's within the office or already a broadcast, but new people from around the league that know the league to talk about it. It could be really, really cool. I mean, you kind of mentioned the good sidelines because of new stadiums, small pushback for the championship side. Colorado Springs half the time was just showing the roof of their stadium, and it was so frustrating to watch. It's like, you built this. This is new.
Yeah. That would have, like, Chattanooga's the same thing. It's like, why is it so zoomed in? Like, this should not have happened. This is a brand new soccer specific stadium. This shouldn't have happened. Even I think Fuego had one match where it's like, I saw more of the crowd than the field, which good for them, good for the crowd. But it's like, I'm not wanting to see someone just sit there with their hot dog and beer. Like, I can't see the set piece. I don't even know who took it.
Oh, man. John, how do you feel about the whole broadcast? I mean, you're taking clips from everything. You get to see the good and the bad and the really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can agree with a lot of the points about League One in terms of the great variation from team to team, where if you think about like the Las Vegas Lights, where the camera angle is so low to the ground, it's hardly tracking the ball at all, frankly. Like, it's impossible to watch a Las Vegas game without wanting to die. Whereas, and I'm going to push back actually on Colorado Springs, where doing what I try to do with like the tactical breakdowns, they've got that beautiful high angle that when it isn't catching the roof is completely great for my means. I think I'm somewhat of a bad perspective just because I'm a complete sicko with like the way I try to watch these games. But I do think that overall, the commentary teams that are being run out of Tampa Bay, or Tampa rather, from the league office have been pretty good. You think about like Watts and Carr, for instance, but they have a couple of teams, whether that's like Joe Malfa, Gary Bailey, Josh Eastern does a good job, where they at least cover a decent amount of games per week. And they make sure that if there is a good local broadcast, it's available. So Indy 11, for instance, all of their home games, you were getting the home broadcast with very professional local broadcasters. So I think there's an awareness of which games need a little bit of help to bring about a more professional presentation of it. But definitely agreed on all the points about doing more to promote the league within that ESPN infrastructure, because it's buried below lacrosse and cornhole and whatever else is in the deep depths of ESPN.
Don't get me wrong, I've definitely been under the influence and gone into the deep depths and seen what's in there. Let me tell you, watching some cornhole at 3 a.m, awesome. But kind of moving away from the pitch and kind of on the pitch as well, but moving away from it mostly. You know, all of us, we cover the leagues, we cover everything from a wider perspective. We want to try to bring that perspective to it, but we wouldn't have started doing this if we weren't fans first, right? And you have already mentioned it, Kyle. Our fans are important. Talking about supporters are important. You are a main part of the supporters' life, not even just in, Forward Masson, but also just League One. How inclusive did our leagues feel? Did it feel like really everyone belonged, or was it just kind of like people could show up, but it still felt out of place?
I think it varies by team and supporters. It's kind of tough because I feel like there are definitely teams. The teams itself, like, they do as much as they can, and they try, and they might make some hiccups, but at least they put in the effort. And I think there's a good amount of teams that do that. And then there's some teams that just don't put any effort into it at all. And then with the fans, it's kind of the same thing. I feel like, yeah, like there might be some like banter and shit talking back and forth to each other. But at the same time, like, at least you kind of get an idea of like, all right, the fans normally get it. They try. And like, as long as you're not being a complete bigot, at the very least, you'll get a chance. You'll get a shot. You'll get a chance. But I feel like there still needs to be an increase in women supporters and those that identify as women for League One. It is still very male heavy. Yeah, so I think that would be kind of something that would be nice. I also feel like in terms of different races, like there could be more, Latino supporters and definitely more Asian supporters. That's something that I've kind of noticed as well. I think it's definitely growing, but we can see a lot more of it. Not only just in the public space of fans, but even just like if you see them like Kappa stands or organizing stuff, it kind of feels like there still needs to be that increase on that end. But I think it's not because of not feeling inclusive. I just think it's the accessibility and just it's just hard. Like, how do you reach out? Like, how to reach out is kind of like the big question that just needs to be answered. So I think that is definitely something. And even at like Fort Madison, it's still kind of safe. It's like we still need to bring in more people of color. We still need to bring in more women. We still need to bring in those with disabilities. And so I think that's something that every team's still trying to figure out and work towards. Some are definitely putting in that honest effort, and others just probably won't. And I think that's also contingent on the league as well to try and make it seem like, yes, we can be inclusive, but you can't just say we're going to be inclusive and have all these screenshots of guys in the stands and cheering. Like, and if there is going to be a woman, it can't just be like someone's daughter, like a child. Like, it has to be like adult women that want to be there as well. Like you got to find a way to show that promotion, not just like have your token group or like your token like 5 people there.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah, I feel like kind of for the women, we get a lot of like the offshoots of your USL 1 or USL Championship. We get the fans who are just fans of the club, and then they come and support the women, which for the most part I've been really impressed by. So if Kyle, what you're saying, like you see that lack of diversity, it trickles down to the women's league. I would really love to see, maybe this is something they already have and I just am not privy to it, but headquarters kind of requiring clubs to have a designated like supporters group rep. Someone in the front office who I know everyone's super busy and they have so much going on already, but if they can take the time out each week to just kind of talk to supporters groups, make sure that it's inclusive, the culture is positive, it's open, warming, welcome, they have everything they need. I feel like that would go really far. And then of course making sure that they're supporting the women's teams too if they have one and whatnot. I feel like that would mean a lot.
Yeah. John, how do you feel like things were from the fan perspective this year with inclusion?
I would echo a lot of the same thoughts in terms of that club level where I think everyone needs to do more. When you have, let's be honest, a player base that is predominantly people of color, and that's not represented in the fans, I think there is a bit of a disconnect where there's a real chance to make these clubs community institutions that are reaching out across the board and not just targeting those upper middle class white people who you traditionally think of as soccer moms or soccer fans, because that is such an antiquated outlook on who is in love with the game in this country. So I think that's one area where certainly there needs to be improvement. I do think that Liz spoke to the way that a handful, at least, of championship sides have spread out into the women's game. And I'm definitely thinking about my own interest with Indy 11 here, where the Brickyard Battalion supporters group, the club itself, have done a tremendous job of making that one of the premier clubs in the W League right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So I think we've seen steps in the right direction. And I know I'm bleeding into the next question that we're going to get to a bit, but there were a number of instances this year and in years past of very racially focused fan abuse towards players. There was an instance, alleged but all but confirmed, of a player targeting a fan for their weight. And that's simply unacceptable, where there needs to be a sense of civility and decency in the way that you're supporting the fan base that you're playing for, but also if you're a fan looking at the players. So there's definitely improvement, but I do think that overall, at least in the fan sense, the league is in a good place.
Yeah, and kind of talking about what you've already started bleeding into a little bit. Every single league, obviously we don't have a League 2 person on tonight. I meant to mention this at the top of the show. We had someone that was planning to come on, but they got sick, so they were unfortunately unable to come on because everyone's getting sick right now. It's just that time of the year. But every single league, League 2, League 1, W League, Championship, we had, the HQ or whichever social media, League 2, W League, so on and so forth, come out with a post with their fancy graphic that says, "We are aware of blank situation. Blank situation is bad and we do not stand for it. The USL does not stand for blank. We continue to support diversity in our game or safetyness in our game. You can throw whatever you want that into." We saw in League 2, we saw a couple of racial incidents pop up. Same with the championship. A lot of them, unfortunately, in the championship, especially with Monterey Bay. In League 1, we saw, Chattanooga with player abuse, and I think a couple of other racial incidents. In W League, I don't think there was that many of those graphics that came up, but we also know what happened with the NWSL and how that's connected with the W League. there's a lot of gross stuff that happens, and it sucks. Do we feel, and I'm going to start with you, Liz, do you feel like the leagues handled it well, handled it poorly, or do you think they were just afraid?
Yeah, everybody was definitely afraid. I noticed every league, just across the board, men and women, concerning the Sally Yates report, and even reporting on it prior to the report coming out. They're so tentative. They just want to hide behind their safe sport shield, and just say that, oh, we adhere to safe sport policy and procedure, and we're fine and we're good here. But it's not enough. I think that it's something that thankfully we didn't have anything come out that we know of, starting the W League. So that's all I can speak on for that. But it's something that the W League USL has to prove kind of over the next couple of years and so on. It's going to be an ongoing project for them to prove that they deserve to run a women's league. I think everyone here knows, all of our fan bases can get very political and very socially aware, but women's soccer fans are super aware of it and passionate about it. And it's as leagues become more accessible, fan bases grow, people are just hungry for more women's soccer content. They look to their grassroots clubs in their area, they become aware, and then they follow the league, hopefully. You're going to get a lot of those passionate fans. And it's just something that whenever I talk to people in leagues, I'm like, you need to just kind of be prepared and be aware, because in 5 years or so, you guys are going to be booming with fans, and you need to be aware. You need to have actual procedures in place to make sure fans, staff, players are all safe and heard. And so it's just something that they're going to have to prove over the years. And so far, so good. But yeah. But I mean, for instance, North Carolina has had issues, and they have a W League team. Racing Louisville had issues. They have a W Leagues team. So that's just something that needs to be watched really closely and make sure that, a lot of minors play for those teams, and that they're protected.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't say much with League One. Not so much. I feel like it's been, the whole Jimmy Obleda thing was such a bad look for Chattanooga and the league. And the Players Association said, we understand it. We're acknowledging their investigation. We're still dissatisfied. Even when Chattanooga announced their parting ways with Jimmy Obleda, they were still saying, this was still not good enough. We did not like how the club handled it from start to finish. We still want to file a report with Safe Sport regarding the conduct and the need for someone to investigate it more. So I think it was that situation was a clear one where it was kind of something happened. I think the only reason why it didn't escalate or get bigger than it did is because Jimmy Obleda wasn't around the team, and they fought, and as soon as the season ended, he was gone. I think had he come back, or had Chattanooga just not parted ways with him, then it would have again continued asking those questions, what actually is going on? What is this investigation? Because something clearly happened just for it to be on the radar in the first place that had put Jimmy Obleda in that administrative league. And there's just little to no transparency from the league or Chattanooga themselves. It was kind of we're looking into it. Then they looked into it and said, all right. Then USL League One's we're done. That's not our problem. It's Chattanooga's thing to deal with. And Chattanooga's we're just going to keep him away from the team. And Jimmy Weekly's going to continue coaching it until the end of the year. And then I was all right, he's fired now. They're it kind of feels like they're just all right, that time is over. And it's there's still a lot that we don't understand. And if Jimmy Obleda were to get another coaching job in the U.S. in general, then it's kind of what happened in Chattanooga. No one knows. And I think that was kind of a sore thing for USL League One, just because, there hasn't been as many incidents with, racial language. There has been times where they've looked into it, but this just kind of felt after everything that happened with, the U.S. women's national team and the NWSL, this was a good opportunity for USL to kind of be proactive and kind of show that change. and they just didn't do it. And I think that was kind of like the disappointing part of it all.
With Chattanooga, I mean, John was on this show where we talked about everything that happened that week, because the same week that all that came out was the same week that Monterey Bay had another issue.
Yep.
There was just a lot going on. That was the same week as the Sally Yates report. All that happened the same week, and we've talked about it. And the thing that we landed on with Chattanooga is that I'm trying to remember if they currently have one, if they are getting one, a W League team. They have an academy system. They have a League 2 team. If you're someone who wants to play during the summer with League 2, or you want to go to W League, why would you want to go to that kind of place? I mean, that, especially since the front office not only was acting weird about it, they wished, I know it's strange, they wished him a happy birthday like 3 days after he got suspended.
Yeah.
Which that was a weird thing. And why would a young player want to go be involved with that? That just makes that whole situation just more toxic.
Yeah, and it's especially in Chattanooga, it's like, why go to the Red Wolves when you have another team right there? And they're showing, so far, they have at least shown they're going to put in the work that it takes to take care of, that younger player. So that is kind of like the good part as well. It's like, why go to the Red Wolves if Chattanooga FC is right there? And what systematic changes are you going to have to get that involved?
For sure. John, we've talked about it a lot. I know we've talked about it on air and private. I mean, what more do we need to, I guess, hash out with it? Because it seemed like every other week.
Yeah, I mean, I think without a doubt, this is the biggest stain on the USL Championship in the past, this season, and going forward, where if you think about from the first weeks of the season, Hugh Roberts with Monterey Bay was receiving racial abuse from fans. He is one of the leading figures in the USL Black Players Alliance, and then it happened again later in the season. You had the whole thing with Racing Louisville, which of course was overseen by James O'Connor, who is essentially the head of the sporting side of things for the broader Louisville organization. He received no punishment from any parties, much less internally or from the USL Championship. There has been vocal fan response and nothing has come about. There was the Lawrence Wyke incident at the end of the season where the USL levied a fairly heavy suspension on him and then reversed it basically the minute they received pressure from Tampa Bay and the Players Union, when it was clear from the statements that the Tampa Bay Rowdies made that their own player had clearly said some pretty horrendous things. Even at the club level, there have been real poor missteps that just capture the fact that the league doesn't do enough to promote diversity and inclusion and cut down on discrimination. I'm specifically thinking about Indy 11 in the wake of the reversal of the Roe decision. They were clamping down on supporter signs about women's reproductive rights. For this to be the state of affairs for the league in 2022 is frankly embarrassing. And when so many other things are going right, when so many of the initiatives have been successful, for these consistent failures to happen in terms of discrimination is just completely disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, can't say much better than that. Kind of moving away from, I guess, a heavier topic, kind of going into what we do. We're all content creators of, some sort. Liz kind of already talked about our experience with W League, which that was a really cool experience. How did we feel that the leagues uplifted their content creators? Did they do it? Did they do it enough? Should they do more? Are some people too involved? I'm going to start with you, Liz, because you do have direct experience with that.
I personally don't think you can ever do too much content, especially with women's teams. You can never have too much content. And I think that Lisa and USL did a phenomenal job making sure content creators who maybe at the time were not involved in the USL at all, but were maybe just women's soccer in general, they made them feel included. They helped generate ideas for them to create content, which is sometimes like the hardest thing is to just figure out what to do. And yeah, they did a phenomenal job. Pick and Panel was awesome. They made sure that there was weekly content, that it was diverse. It covered all the teams, and was just a lot of fun, got people engaged, and that's really all you need for content. I think I mean, no notes. No notes on that. They did a great job. And I'm excited to see kind of where Lisa takes Pick and Panel next season, who she gets involved, to keep that rotating fresh. I'd love to see that maybe have like a celebrity guest every week, like a different one every week. Just someone in women's soccer in general. Get like Meg Linehan 1 week, and just kind of tossed around, make it fun and different.
I'm going to throw my personal idea. Lisa, if you're listening, whichever player was the player of the week before gets to do the pick'em.
Oh, yeah.
Just an idea.
This is why Kayla is the king of PR.
Yeah, that's what can I say? Kyle, how about you? How do you feel like the league did, and maybe also teams, but just the league did to support its content creators?
It's interesting because I would say last year when Ryan Madden was part of USL's headquarters, he was very good at like getting tuned in, talking to Elliot and I, and at least like being supportive. And I think that's been the biggest thing with the league is we have not gotten anything from the league saying, "Hey, stop doing this. Stop making fun of the Chattanooga coach for being horny on Maine and putting his Cash App out there." Like, thankfully, nothing like that happened, but I think from the league perspective, there wasn't really much in terms of highlighting what content creators are doing. And that's not just Walking 90. That's, On the Rocks podcast. That's any local podcast that people are doing for their respective teams. But I think for the clubs themselves, for this year, we were able to talk to I would say almost every team in League One, that whether it's a front office person, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player, and also the expansion teams that were coming in. So I think like the clubs themselves are doing a pretty good job at trying to let themselves be available for those content creators to get, coaches or players interviewed if the time works out. So I think that's been pretty good on the club side. I think they should continue doing that, making sure, because that's what's going to get more people interested in your teams and getting people to care more, is having people that they're not getting paid by the club. They're just doing it because they really, really, really care about their team, or they really care about the league. So just leaving them more open. It like Liz said, you can never have too much content. So I would say the clubs were pretty good. Like I said, being responsive, or at least being open to allowing us to talk to players and coaches. And I think, for those that are doing podcasts on their respective teams, just keep doing it, because we see it, and it's gonna take the fans to really get going. I think the clubs do a good job at least being accessible in that way. I don't know how it would work with promoting it, because I'm sure there's that fine line that you got to figure out. But at the very least, it's nothing. There's been no pushback, and I think that's a good first step.
I think something that we definitely saw with the USL show, and I think I saw with Walking 90 as well, teams were able to take some quotes from interviews and put them up on graphics and be like, look what was said. This is how great they think we are. But there's also a lot of other teams that they'll allow their players to be interviewed. They'll allow their front office people to be interviewed, but they don't let any of that content really be seen, if that makes sense. They don't promote what was shared about their team. And sometimes that rubs me the wrong way a little bit, of like, they're putting in the work, and they, a coach or player said something wonderful about the team or about the front office or about the fans, and they're just like, that's a fan podcast. We're too professional for that.
Yeah, there are definitely some teams that, they're still like, that is a fan podcast. Tormenta being the one that we interviewed Marco Micheletto about this point last year, and they were the ones that took some of the quotes and put it on there. And I know that was really cool for us to see, or they're at least like, if we were talking to a player, I think Santa Barbara and Lexington at least said like, hey, we're going to have one of our people on this show, be sure to check it out. So I think it was kind of cool in that aspect. But yeah, definitely trying to get more of that, whether it is, hey, this player is going to be on this podcast. And I know the players do a great job. Obviously the players are going to promote it out there, retweet it, or put something on social media as well that they're going to make an appearance. So, yeah.
John, you have been really, interesting place with content, especially with Backheeled. You talked about how you do get a little bit of exclusive things. You obviously do what you do, and you're very much held in a high regard, as you should be. How do you feel like the championship clubs do to uplift their people and just the league itself?
I think this year, when I was able to join Backheeled and get a modicum of legitimacy of, okay, here's a person who's now doing work for a proper outlet, where suddenly there were opportunities, like I had to interview Sarah Gordon before the USL Championship final, where I was getting to occasionally have communications with the league office about people to interview or whatnot. And I was very much shut out from those opportunities before I reached that quote unquote legitimacy. And I think that the league can certainly do more to promote the fact that there are tons of people devoting hours upon hours of their time to boost the USL, to raise the profile of it. And that extends to the club level as well. I'm going to echo what everyone has been saying, that all content is good content at the end of the day. The more eyeballs you're getting on your team is ultimately a win, no matter what. And I think a lot of clubs, for whatever reason, are resistant to promoting what their fans are saying. I'm not to call out Detroit City, who I think is an exemplary organization in terms of what they're doing on and off the pitch, but they basically only promote coverage from the two major papers in Detroit, rather than the legion of excellent coverage that you get from devoted Detroit City fans. There just seems to be a gap where there's a lot of coverage that isn't getting as many eyeballs as it deserves, because these clubs just don't see it in the proper context. So I think there is a bit of a disconnect, but I think broadly the league is improving in terms of how they're promoting what people are trying to do in terms of content creation.
Beautiful. So I have one last question that we have planned for, and then we got a couple questions from the chat that I'm going to throw in, do some rapid fire off those. But I'm going to start off with Liz. What do you think the W League could do to improve? Like, what are the things that they did really well, but what are the big things that you're like, if we do this, then we'll be here?
Right off the bat, which I know is like already changed because they have the Pacific Northwest conference coming in, expand more into the West. So more on that later. And a couple things to like, I'm like, keep it that way. Keep the championship final hosted by like your top seed. Don't have like a neutral venue. We hate it. In the NWSL, we had it in the WPSL. It was miserable. That's just that environment. You just can't buy it, basically. Like Aurora had this fantastic championship final ambiance, and sadly they lost, but that was memorable. That was such a memorable time. And you don't get that with a neutral venue. But some things to change: be more transparent about the Super League. That's a big thing that's supposed to be around the corner. Be transparent about it. How is that going to affect USLW? What are some ways that they will feed off each other and benefit each other? How is it going to complete the puzzle? Because I think Super League will complete the puzzle for women's soccer in general, but also USL. So yeah, those are my big pointers, my big things that I want to change. Is Liz also a Republic fan? I'm like, I don't know. I am when they're I am sometimes. I used to be way more involved. I was on a Sac Republic podcast a while ago, and I don't know, I think I just kind of I don't know, I think I had a couple bad experiences, but I love them and what they've like historically done for the community, and yeah, so we'll see, kind of. I don't know, but I respect them. They do fantastic things for our community, and that's what means the most to me.
Kyle, what do you think needs to be the biggest improvement of League One, and what's the thing that you're like, yes, you're nailing this, for the love of God, don't change it?
I I would say, and I saw a question about an expansion. West, the Midwest, and Northeast. We are good on the Southeast region. We don't need more teams in the Southeast. We're good. Please expand to other parts of the country. The other thing I agree with Liz, like having the higher seed host the final. I think that is something that needs to change. And I think a thing would be cool to see is on that final day, kind of like how the European leagues and MLS, like they have all their games happening at the same time. Because when Tormento was playing Chattanooga and Greenville was playing, it was like Tormento's leading. It's like, oh god, they're up to second, and then like Greenville got a goal, so like they dropped like all. It was just like cool seeing how the table could change, because it kind of felt like by the time you get to that final. No, God damn it, Wilmington. Yeah, I know. No more Southeast teams. I swear. But I think having like a deadline decision day would be really, really cool in terms of trying to follow. And we saw it in the World Cup today with like Group C, and just like how one goal by any team could drastically change like who would advance. I think that would just be really cool to see, going in, and especially if the league continues to be at the level of parity that it is right now.
John, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, just to circle back, I think the diversity inclusion issue is really the primary thing at this point, where there has to be a zero tolerance policy towards the issues that you're seeing if you want to grow this fan base to broader communities than those traditional soccer areas. And in addition to that, on a more pitch-centric side, keep doing what you're doing in terms of promoting downtown stadium projects. I know, for instance, Phoenix Rising just got a much more central location. We've talked about Louisville, Colorado Springs in that vein. And then one more point would be the ESPN Plus deal, which is kind of sort of up. Make sure that you're not going boneheaded with this. Keep the league as available as possible for as many people who want to watch it as possible, because getting eyeballs is the number one way to grow the game, to grow the profile of your league, especially when MLS has made the decision to put itself behind a fairly exorbitant deal with Apple TV, where there's a real chance for the USL Championship, USL League One, the W League, and the Super League to take a step up in terms of visibility. So just don't make the wrong decision, because you need to make this game accessible in as many ways as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we got a couple quick rapid fire. I want to start off with one that we saw early, and it said for top 5, but I'm just going to do the favorite stadium that you've seen within the league that you follow. Liz.
What was the question one more time? Sorry.
The favorite stadium that's in the league.
I really liked Indy 11s. I know it was kind of like an indoor kind of setup, but it felt really
Grand Park, yeah.
It felt really intimate. I just really liked it, and I love how they had the battalion up above, and they were honestly one of the best fan bases I have seen. They turned out for their women's league and their women's league team, and it was phenomenal. I really like that that setting. I know it's like it's turf, right? Artificial turf in there, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
so I used to live 5 minutes away from that venue, so it's tricky for me to see that.
Yeah, like on TV or on screen kind of thing. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah,
Aurora FC,
exactly.
obviously, for their like ambiance and environment. I really like that. Always sold out. And I don't know, I think I'm trying to think of anyone else. Queensboro, I can't remember if they had like the skyline in the background. But they have some like skyscrapers off in the distance, which was really cool. And they always had a great turnout as well. They have a very passionate community, and I love that. Yeah, those are my favorite on top of my head.
Kyle?
I'm trying to think. I would say City Stadium in Richmond has still been, in terms of the experience I had, was probably the best one. There's still a lot of teams that I need to visit. Like, I want to see the new stadiums in Chattanooga and Tormenta. I'm very curious about Lexington and how that goes. I will say Santa Barbara will probably forever win once they come into the league, because their stadium, you could see the beach from one of the bleachers, and it's like that's too good of a deal to pass up. So once Santa Barbara comes in, it will likely be them. But for now, I think Richmond Stadium, just like the history behind it, and when those fans get into it, it does get pretty loud. So, and of course, I'm saying that, so and I can't say Ford Madison and Breeze Stevens Field. I'm going to try and be unbiased.
I mean, obviously Memorial Stadium is just awesome. Even on TV, it's cool. As someone who watches on TV, I loved watching Ford Madison matches. I felt like the stadium was small enough and close enough, especially close enough that it felt real. It felt very intimate. So I always loved watching it on ESPN Plus. So that was always one of my favorites. John, how about you?
Yeah, in terms of just sheer visuals, I got to shout out the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. You've got the, I believe, Allegheny River. You just occasionally get a train coming by, which is always a plus. In terms of the overall experience, I kind of got to give it to Detroit here. They pack Keyworth week in and week out. They are very vocal, very passionate. I know I'm sort of playing to the crowd with this one, but it's just a different level of fun to watch them play at that stadium.
I mean, yeah, I'm a little bit mad that I have yet to see a ball hit a train at either Pittsburgh or at Detroit City. And it bothers me a little bit. I feel like it should be a halftime entertainment instead of a crossbar challenge, just like a caboose challenge. We'll work on it. Let's see. There was a couple of others. There was one that I saw a while back, and it was basically a league tournament, just like the EFL Cup. So for W League, this would be, I guess, just a proper, U.S. Open Cup for women. Could you see that happening once Super League comes in?
Yes, I think so. I think having that tier filled is really important to having an Open Cup that's worthwhile for everyone. But there's some amateur teams, some WPSL, UWS, W League teams that could hang with some NWSL teams. And I would love to see it. And in general, sure, you may have a blowout, but also on the plus side, you could have like a Sac Republic story where they go all the way. And I think that's just as meaningful. And yeah, it could be a blowout, but you're still engaging the fans. Fans are excited to see it. And so, yeah, I know Open Cup is always a big debate in women's, as is Pro Rel. It's a big debate and like women's soccer fan bases. But I think once Super League comes in, that it's something that needs to legitimately be talked about by all the leagues. But a lot of the leagues don't want to play with each other. So that also has to change. So, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah.
How about the just like an EFL Cup, a USL Cup between League One and the Championship? See the two winners of San Antonio taking on Tormenta.
I have been pounding the drum of a USL Cup with Championship League One and League Two, and Brandon Mays was the other one that was saying it as well. That would be awesome if there was just like a USL Cup and all USL teams could be in it. I know it'd be kind of tough for like the League Two teams in terms of like how they wouldn't, but if we could just have something like that, that would be, even if it is kind of like that Super Cup idea as well, that'd be pretty cool as well. I'm hoping there is a USL Cup, maybe if they do get Pro Rel in whatever year it is.
Yeah. John, how do you feel about an EFL Cup?
I mean, I completely love it. Let's be real. I would rather have Pro Rel if I could like do either or, but I mean, give me as much soccer as I can get at this level.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. And there was another question that was in there that was pretty fun. We've seen this a few times now. There was our good friend Gio. What kind of brought him onto the map was whenever the USL did the EUSL Cup when COVID was still like cute and not deadly and stuff. And it was, they got to play with players and, they did the Rocket League tournament. I think recently they had the eFootball, I think is what it called, the PES, whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, awful game. But they had that whole thing. How would you guys like to see just more of that, just USL sponsored tournaments with video games and stuff where fans could play with the players or with front office or even just represent their club, because this is the only time that some of these fans will ever get to properly represent their team.
I think at least doing, and this is something like teams could do, is just have a player or coach play with a fan and they can just have a conversation. I think that would be really cool. I'm trying to think like what other, like it would be interesting to watch like a Overwatch competition and with someone representing their team and doing Overwatch. That would be, I would pay money for that. Like that, okay, maybe I won't pay money, but that would be probably my top, like some kind of first person or just a Fortnite nonsensical, like goof around with someone. And then all of a sudden you find out it's like some representative's like 10-year-old kid who's just better at video games than everyone. It would be pretty funny.
You go the Tucson route with Rocket League and pay a professional player to win it all. You could go. That was a weird time.
Ryan, if there was a Football Manager, would be an interesting one as well. Just like a representative doing Football Manager. I don't want that to happen because I have a gut feeling Ford Madison's asked me to do it. And I don't want to fully commit.
Oh, could you? This is what if with a Football Manager, it has to be live streamed. A fan has to go against the team's manager, and they have to outmanage the team's manager. Oh, that'd be fun. What do you? I mean, is there anything? How would that really work for? I guess. Could you see something like that working with W League, or maybe combine it with Super League, Liz?
Yeah. I mean, if FIFA ever gets the NWSL in, that would be cool. Football Manager, I know, is working on a comprehensive like database that's not just like a mod. So that would be kind of cool. I know a lot of the players in the NWSL play video games, and I could see a lot of opportunity for collaboration in the W League. Get players who play, get fans who play, do some sort of tournament. Overwatch would be a lot of fun. But I think there's like, it falls on the stereotype that women don't like video games, and that's not true. And so I want to see a women's league kind of go against that stereotype and embrace women gamers.
I would love to watch just a full tournament of just like W League itself. This is our true USL Cup. All W League, League 2, Championship, League 1, they're winners of the Overwatch League have to go off just 1v1v1v1.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
We found it. We figured it out.
I'm not playing, but I will watch. I am terrible at Overwatch, so I know I don't want to embarrass myself.
It's not about the win.
Give me like a USL Jeopardy though.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who we could get on board with hosting. Who would be? It'd probably be Carr, right? Devin Carr would probably be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
He's the Alex Trebek of this whole setup.
So, look, this is turning into a super long episode without getting super rambly and falling into whatever, and hopefully me not falling into hypothermia along the way. I just want to say thank you to everybody listening. And the way we've been doing this for Liz, Kyle, you, this is the first time on the show. So when we do outros, plug whatever you want, plug all of the things, and also say what's ever on your mind. If it's soccer related, non-soccer related, I do favorite music choice of the week. And John goes into usually just like some kind of Tolkien world, or whatever is the Star Wars flavor of the month. So, pick your favorite. So, final thoughts for the people, Liz?
Keep an eye out on some cool W League announcements tomorrow. Just like insanely cool. Maybe I am the only one who thinks it's cool, but it's big. And in general, keep an eye out for that. Follow Protagonist Soccer. They're a bunch of good dudes. We recently got somebody made a new account, like a fake Protagonist account, and then paid $8 to get it verified, and then trolled us for like a week. But I kind of thought it was funny. But it was funny. The stuff they were tweeting, I was like, oh my God, I can't laugh, but it's funny. But follow them. They're a bunch of good guys. They put out really quality content, year round, passionate and whatnot. And I don't know. What else do I plug? That's it. That's all I can think of.
You have any other thoughts? Anything you're listening to?
Let's see. I'm always listening to whatever Shea Butter FC puts out. Diaspora, United. Follow them. Subscribe to them. They always put out the best content. Andre and Courtney at Diaspora are like just the greatest people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and well, not meeting personally because they're on the East Coast, but pleasure of getting to create content with, and yeah, so follow them.
Beautiful. Kyle?
All right, yeah, you can follow me at Kyle Coche if you want. If you like the Milwaukee Bucks and you can deal with it, that's probably what's going to be most of my tweets for the next couple months. Otherwise, Walking 90 Pod, that's how it is, at Walking 90 Pod for that. And if you want to be on that show, definitely feel free to hit us up. Just keep in mind, we will make fun of your team, whichever one you support. We will find something to make fun of you for it. Otherwise, follow your local teams, podcast, content creators. I think there's a lot of good people putting out good work, and just getting more of that awareness makes everyone at least more knowledgeable what's going on with the league. And then my thoughts. The Spotify Wrapped can definitely create an illusion about someone that might not fully be truth. So for me, for example, one of my top 5 songs is Holocene by Bon Iver. I'm not a Bon Iver fan, but my 2-year-old loves that song for bedtime. Hence why it is in my top 5 songs. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at someone's Spotify Wrapped. Sometimes it's very clear they might have someone sharing their account with them.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I love that. John?
Well, like Kyle's kid, I also fall asleep listening to Bon Iver. I do want to shout out. I do want to shout out the U.S. World Cup coverage. I've been doing it backheeled. Basically, every time they play, I'm breaking down one play that sort of shows what the tactical approach is for the game, and I think it's sort of a fun way to cover the tournament. In terms of something more random, I've been kind of binging like every single movie that Colin Farrell has ever been in, and I think he's just an incredible human being. So shout out Colin Farrell.
He does not get enough credit.
I can't even think.
He
like,
really
what
doesn't.
Have I seen? I'm sure there's a movie out there, but I feel like I've not seen a movie with him in it.
What movies?
I feel like the best intro would be Minority Report, where it's like Tom Cruise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg directed it.
Okay.
Most recently, he was in Banshees of Inisherin, which is kind of really depressing, but he's immense in it, and it's like twistedly funny. He's just great. Anything he's in is great.
He was the Penguin in Batman.
That's right. He's under 8 pounds of makeup. Yeah. SWAT. Exactly. There you go, Andy. Miami Vice, by the way, is nonsense, but he's brilliant in it.
I now need to.
So,
now I know what I'm watching this weekend, I guess. I guess for me, consume all the stuff, local content. Everybody that's on here and everybody that's normally on the USL show, everybody at Protagonist, Backheeled, Walking 90, they all put out amazing stuff individually. So check it all out. That is days and days and days of content that you can just really expose yourself to, and it's all great stuff. I am 2 days away from completing my internship. I am no longer a free intern. I can break free of my slavery, so shout out to me. And let's see. Piece of music that I've been listening to, Dvorak Cello Concerto. Highly recommend. Goes hard. So But yeah, that's I think that's about it for today. Listen, it was a longer episode, but I had some fun. I hope you all enjoy listening to it. It was definitely an informative listen for me, and I hope it was for you all. And even though he was not on the show tonight, for the final times at night, or I guess the only time at night, cue Alan's voice.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. This and every episode is brought to you by the Beautiful Game Network. Find podcasts and other written work at bgn.fm. Once again, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you guys again next week.